Good evening, team. Thank you for joining this evening. We'll start the session by in another 1 or 2 minutes. We'll plan to start exactly 7 o'clock. Okay, now it is 7. Let's get started.
Good evening, everyone. I am Elizabeth from Team Obscura. Am I audible? So, for our interactions, please make use of the comment session and please do type yes or no so that I'll know whether I can take the session forward. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, so on behalf of Obscura, I would like to welcome you to our next YouTube live session. And today we will be discussing about the most common topic of discussion among the testing community, that is ISTQB. Let's start by giving you a walkthrough of what exactly we will be looking into today. So today we'll have a look at the following contents: ISTQB big picture, knowledge levels, time management and effort, the 2011 versus 2018 syllabus, chapter-wise introduction and questions. Then you'll have a quiz time to make this live session more interactive, and then we'll see what is the way forward. So let's get started and make the session more interactive. Before we go into the session, let me give you a brief introduction of what this ISTQB is all about. So, as you all know, ISTQB stands for International Software Testing Qualification Board. The basic foundation level exam is characterized by the following. That is, you have 40 questions, and each of these questions will give you 1 mark. And something to be happy about here is you don't have negative marks, so that you can attempt every question of the question paper. But to clear this exam, you would need 26 or more points, which accounts for 65% of your total marks. And you have to complete the entire exam in 60 minutes, which is also quite tiresome compared to the difficulty of the question. Now you might be thinking about Indian Testing Board or ITB. Definitely, you would have come across this while checking out for your fees or registration related to this exam. So, how ISTQB board works will give you an insight into this. We have different boards for each country under ISTQB. Since we are based in India, the ITB or the Indian Testing Board conducts ISTQB exam for us on their behalf. Suppose had it been some other country, let's say Egypt, Then we would be having the ESTB or the Egyptian Software Testing Board conducting the exam. So this is exactly how the ITB or the Indian Testing Board is related to the ISTQB board. I hope you are aware of how these are related now. So going forward, next, let me give you an insight into the syllabus. This is exactly how the entire syllabus would look like. As you see, you have 6 modules to cover, and each of this will be divided into submodules. And in the slides going forward, we'll see what exactly each module teaches us, and we'll also see some sample questions from each of them. Before we start studying ISTQB, something we need to be aware of is the K level or the knowledge level. Every chapter will have keywords and learning objectives classified into K levels. So this is actually a term that is mentioned throughout the syllabus. So it becomes equally important to have an idea about it. The entire syllabus would have 3 K levels. That is, as you see in the slides, that is K1, K2 and K3, where K1 stands for remembering something, and all you have to do is answer the questions by remembering a point in the syllabus. Under this K1, you will have 20 questions. K2 means based on the understanding a topic in the syllabus, answer the questions. You have around 12 questions under K2 category. And last, K3, which is the toughest level where you need to apply something you have learned, which means it's very, very close to the practical scenarios you might be coming across in your testing career. So, other than this, we have a certain number of keywords included in every chapter that will also come under the K1 level. Let's have a look at the 3 different types of questions just to make you aware how each level is different from the other. So, first we have a K1 level question with us. Let me just read out the question for you. Which of the following is a typical test objective? You have 4 options: preventing defects, repairing defects, comparing actual results to expected results, analyzing the cause of failure. I'm sure after seeing all these 4 options, definitely you would have taken one option as the answer. Now let's see which one is the right answer. Among these 4, preventing defects is the right answer. So how exactly can you say this is a K1 level question and not a K2 level question? For this, I have just put a screenshot of the syllabus. Look at this. This is a screenshot taken from our ISTQB syllabus. As you see, the highlighter is highlighting a point to prevent defects that falls under the typical objectives of testing. And the question you had just now seen is which of the following is a typical test objective? And the answer was preventing defects. This is exact replica of what is put in the syllabus. That is, you can answer every K1 question just by remembering whatever is put in the syllabus. So, which means is the easiest of the lot. Going forward, next we have the K2 level question. A K2 level question would look like this. A product owner says that your role as a tester on an agile team is to catch all the bugs before the end of each iteration. Which of the following is a testing principle that could be used to respond to this statement? You have 4 options as usual. The first one is defect clustering. Then you have testing shows the presence of defects, absence of error falsy, and then root cause analysis. Suppose you are a person who is familiar with the 7 testing principles. Definitely you will be able to rule out the option D, which is wrong. So D is not a principle. Now you have 3 options A, B, and C. Now, to select which one is the right answer, you should focus on some keywords that will be definitely given in the question. So, if you take the question here, you have a term called catch all the bugs before the end of each iteration. But if you know the testing principle, this is something which is not possible. And how do you know that this is something which is not possible? Thus, we have the next slide to give you a more brief explanation. Look at this. The answer to this question is option B, and this is selected based on the principle testing can show the presence of defects but cannot prove their absence, which means testing will always show some defects and you can never catch all the bugs. Apart from this, you have a principle called the exhaustive testing, and exhaustive testing makes it impossible for you to catch all the bugs. So, both of these principles help us conclude that option B is the right answer. So, here it is not a direct replica of your seven principles, but rather you need to understand what exactly each principle says to come and conclude at a particular option. Last, we have the K3 level question. As you see, a K3 level question can look very, very lengthy. But then I can assure you this is not very difficult. All you have to do is just apply whatever you had studied with the syllabus. So let me just read the question for you. You are testing a mobile app that allows users to find a nearby restaurant based on the type of food they want to eat. Consider the following list of test cases, priorities, and dependencies in the following format. And then the question is, which of the following is a possible test execution schedule that considers both priorities and dependencies? So if you look at it, what you will be basically doing is to arrange based upon the priority. As you see, you have test case 3 and 4 with the highest priority, that is priority 1. But corresponding to this priority, if you look at the logical dependency column, you can see that this test case 3 and 4 will execute only if you execute the dependency test case, that is test case number 2, which means now the order of execution would be 2, then either 3 or 4. Now, just go and look what test case number 2 requires. So, corresponding to this test case number 2, you can see that the logical dependency is test case number 1, which means that before 2 is executed, 1 needs to be executed. So, now the order would be 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then you just have one more option left, that is 5. So, based upon this order, the correct answer would be option B. So look at this. This is really simple, and all you need to apply is a concept that you would have learned in your syllabus. And what exactly is that concept? So the concept is the dependencies must be satisfied while running the test based on priority. So if you know this concept, you will definitely be able to crack that question. So even if a question looks lengthy, please don't misunderstand it to be difficult. It will be the most easiest question. All you have to do is have little patience and read through it. You will definitely come across with an answer. So now we had just seen the different types of K levels, that is K1, K2, and K3. So before we start, let's have a look at how exactly you can manage the syllabus and the effort you need to invest on each of these chapters. So we have 6 modules as you have seen in the syllabus, and the time that is spent for each module as per the ISTQB team is as mentioned in the slide. And you'll have around 7 questions from the first chapter, 6 from the second, 3 from the third, 12 from the fourth, 8 from the fifth, and finally 4 questions from the sixth and final chapter. And I also mentioned the K levels corresponding to these questions. Now, as a common aspirant, you might think, see, test technique has 12 questions. Why not learn test techniques and skip the tool support for testing? It just has 4 questions. But then, please be aware about the K levels that are linked to the questions. That is, these 12 questions are having K2 and K3 difficulty level, whereas those 4 questions, the difficulty level is just K1 and K2. So if you are planning to skip the 6th lesson and learn the test technique lesson, you are definitely into trouble. Why? Because the chances of clearing those 12 questions are comparatively less because the difficulty level is quite high. And please remember, you need to get 26 points to clear this exam. So one tip from my end would be never skip anything based upon these questions. You go in and learn every chapter because you never know which chapter is going to give you a difficult question or which one will give you an easy question. So we'll move forward. When you learn something, it's very important to know what has changed over time. So before 2018 CTFL syllabus, that is the current syllabus what we are following, we had the 2011 syllabus. So this is the update that has happened over the years. So something has changed over the years. So be aware about the changes so that you can focus on them and answer more questions. So the very first point says that fewer K1 learning objectives in general. This is not very positive, as I would say K1 is the most easiest level of question, and now you have few K1 questions. So next point is less focus on chapter 5, that is test management. The chapters have not changed over time, but now the chapter 5 is given less importance. But then you have more emphasis on review, which is a part of chapter 3. Then test techniques are given more importance. Agile is coming into picture, and then white box techniques just get downgraded. So, this is just a synopsis of what has changed over time, and this should definitely be kept in mind while preparing for the exam. Now, let's start with the different chapters. So, the very first chapter, that is the fundamental of testing. As you see, I have mentioned the K levels here, that is K1 and K2. So, whatever is mentioned here are the subtopics that have been included in the chapter. And first, we have something called the what is testing. So it's very basic. Whatever is written here is what it is all about. That is identifying the objectives of testing, differentiating testing from debugging. Then you have why is testing necessary. This is something that would deal with topics like need of testing, differentiating error, defect, and failures. Then you have something called the testing principles, which is considered to be very important from the point of an ISTQB exam. You'll never find an exam without this testing principle question. So after that, we have something called the test process. This is all about the test activities and the respective tasks you would be processing in your day-to-day testing career. Then finally, you have the psychology of testing, and this is something related to the mindset of the testers and how they would behave if a certain, say, instance or a certain incident happens. What would you react to make it better? So, chapter 1 is all about this, and I hope this is quite an easy chapter for you because this is something you would definitely be experiencing in your day to day career. So, let's have a look at the question because solving questions is more important to crack this exam. There's no use reading the theory again and again. You need to do questions. More the questions, more the chances to crack this exam. So, let's go forward. Our first question is from our first lesson, and I have taken more of K2 questions because that's more difficult. K1 is something you would definitely be able to do on your own because it's directly picked up from the syllabus and it's not very difficult. So let's have a look at the first question. Mr. Test has been testing software applications on mobile devices for a period of 5 years. He has a wealth of experience in testing mobile applications and achieves better results in a shorter time than others. Over several months, Mr. Test did not modify the existing automated test cases and did not create any new test case. This leads to a fewer and fewer defects being found by executing the test. What principle of testing did Mr. Test not observe? So, this is a very basic question, and some of you might have come across such scenarios in your career too. So, based upon your understanding, can you just give me which option would be right? These are taken from the 7 testing principles. But please be sure that the testing principle is not directly listed here. This is a K2 question, which means you need to understand the testing principle and then apply it here to conclude the answer. So can you just try giving me an option from these 4? You can just type in the comment box. So let's make the session more interactive. Yeah, I can see that somebody has typed C. Please do try because this is not an exam. It's just a session and you'll definitely learn more by trying out. Trying is the only way to clear this exam. If you're sitting back, not trying, then definitely you're not going to clear this exam. So I think we had sufficient time here. And the correct answer would be option. Which one would you think is the correct answer based upon this principle? You have 4, and the tests are not yet cleared or the tests are not yet updated. So the correct answer here is option C. That is, repeating of test will not find new defects. But is there a principle called repeating of test will not find new defects? Definitely, you wouldn't be finding such a principle if you check the 7 testing principles. So what you have within the principle is beware of pesticide paradox. So if you have gone across these principles of testing once at least, you should be familiar with what I had said just now. So what this pesticide paradox tells is that similar to the pesticides and insects concept, that is, you have a pesticide and you keep continuing using that pesticide again, the insects get repellent, that is, they are getting more resistance and they no longer get destroyed. So the same concept is getting applied here. You have the same test, you are repeating the test again and again. You have some new defects coming up with some new update version or next release. If you're running the same test, how is it that you can find out the new defects? So there's no point in repeating this test again and again. So, as a tester, please keep in your mind that you need to update the test every time something new gets added or a new version is out. Just update the test so that the chances of finding a new defect is very high. So, this is something you would have definitely experienced in your testing career. And as you see, this is a very easy question. All you have to do is just read it slowly, take it slowly, and then you'll definitely get the answer. So, the correct option is option C, that is, repeating of test will not find new defects. So, this is a question from the first chapter, and now we'll move on. We have chapter 2, that is testing throughout the SDLC. So SDLC is something very, very common. And if you have attended testing interviews right from a fresher level to an experienced level, definitely you would have come across this term SDLC, that is software development lifecycle. Maybe they would ask, which SDLC model are you following at your office? So this is very familiar portion. So this chapter mainly includes SDLC models. For example, the different models would be waterfall, iterative, and you have a lot. Then apart from this, you have the test levels. If you speak about the test levels, what I can say is this will include the test bases, test objects, everything related to testing would come in within this test level. Then you have the test types. Types of testings like fundamental testing, functional, non-functional. Yeah, every type of testing would come under this heading. Then you have the maintenance testing, as the word itself show, the maintenance of software. So the testing that would be done to just make sure that the software maintenance is proper. So these are the 4 subsections within this chapter 2. And then we'll just go to the question. So here comes your next question. During an agile development effort, a product owner discovers a previously unknown regulatory requirement that applies to most of the user stories within a particular epic. The user stories are updated to provide for the necessary changes in software behavior. The programmers on the team are modifying the code appropriately. As a tester on the team, what type of test will you run? So this is also very, very practical scenario that you would definitely have come across. That is, your PO comes with some requirement in the middle of the sprint or your agile daily, and then just says that he wants it added to every user story. Then being agile, you are forced to take this change and then you are ready to do the updation. So as given in the question, the programmers on the team are modifying the code appropriately. So being a tester, what type of test will you run? So you have 4 options here: confirmation test, regression test, functional test, and change related test. So let's first take option A, confirmation test. So this is definitely for confirmation that the change is acting properly, or maybe you can say in other words, retesting. So just to make sure it's working fine. So this definitely will be included. Then you have the regression test, just to make sure that the new functionality or modification is not affecting whatever is present within this software. So you would feel that both A and B should be applicable to the scenario. So it's perfectly right to think so. Then how will you say, like, you need to select one option? Now you're in a confusion, like if it's option A or option B. But if you have at least one time gone through your syllabus, You should be aware that the change related test includes both confirmation test as well as regression test. So, if you know that point, then definitely you won't be selecting A or B, but you will be selecting option D, because this change related test will include both confirmation test as well as regression test. So apart from this, you have one more option. So let's just discuss why this is not coming into picture. So option C is functional test. But if you read the question once again, you can see that a product owner discovers a previously unknown regulatory requirement that applies to most of the user stories. So it's just an unknown requirement. It's not saying if it's a functional requirement or a non-functional requirement. So basically you have two types of testing, that is functional and non-functional. But here the question is mentioning that it's something unknown, then definitely you cannot say that you are going to do functional test. So that's how this option C is getting ruled out. So I hope this is clear. And the correct answer for this question is option D, change related test, which includes both option A as well as option B. So going forward, the next chapter is chapter 3, static testing. Static testing is a term that is very common to all of you, and static testing is something you would be also doing on a regular basis, like just checking out if the requirement document is correct, the test cases are correct. It need not be a test case document or some other documents. It can also be your code. You can also check out if the code is proper. You call it as a code review. So whatever checking out or validation you have been doing so far comes under static testing. But then if you hear the word static testing, definitely you would be wondering then how it's going to differ from dynamic testing. So the point here is static testing is mere validation. You are not going to execute any scripts. You are just checking out if the code is correct. Maybe you are checking the syntax is correct, the code logic, what you have written is correct, but you never run the scripts. But when you come to dynamic testing, there, the main point is you are going to execute the test. So that's the main difference between static and dynamic testing for those who are just new to this topic. So this chapter would include static testing. Then you have something called the review process. If you remember, this is something that is given more of importance in the current syllabus. That is, the 2018 syllabus is giving more importance to the review process. And this would include something like types of review, then who is performing the review, the factors that can lead to a successful review. So all this comes under the review process. So now let's go to the next question. So here comes your next question. So this is comparatively easy, and then you can just try out this question. Which two of the following statements about static testing are the most true? So here you can see that the keyword two is put in capital letters. So this is something you need to be careful about while taking the exams. Not all your questions will be select one option. So you will have something called select two options, and then you have to be aware that you need to take two options, or else you can just go wrong with the answer. So you have four options here. Static testing is a cheap way to detect and remove defects. Static testing makes dynamic testing less challenging. Static testing allows early validation of user requirements. Static testing makes it possible to find runtime problems early in the life cycle. When testing safety critical system, static testing has less value because dynamic testing finds the defects better. So I think you can give a try on this, because based on the basic understanding of static testing, you should be able to answer this question. So this is a very basic question. So maybe you can just type in the comment regarding which two options are right. You can just try it out. So the more you try, the more you are going to crack this exam. So please feel free to type it in the comments. I'll be explaining each of this option so that you'll get a better idea of what exactly is right and what exactly is wrong. Yeah, I can see a few comments like Anju is saying that it's option D and E. Okay, so let's start with the explanation. So let's take the first statement. Static testing is a cheap way to detect and remove defects. So generally you should be familiar with something called a concept: defects found earlier are cheaper to remove. So based on that, you can say that static testing is a cheap way to defect removal. Why? Because you are just checking the requirement documents, codes, everything it's getting checked before execution. So it's definitely going to be cheaper way. So option A is right. So we have one more option to select. Now let's go to the next option. Static testing makes dynamic testing less challenging. So this is exactly a false statement. Why? Because something is not going to make dynamic testing less challenging, or rather, dynamic testing is getting more challenging because you are dealing with the execution and you might be facing some conflicts in the test environment or something like that. So, option B is false. Now, moving on, you have option C, which says static testing allows early validation of user requirements. So, option C is early validation of user requirements. So you should be familiar with this statement, that is validation of user requirements. So here also we'll be able to understand that C is the correct option because you're very, very sure with the keyword validation and you are familiar with the term user requirements too. So early validation of user requirement means you are checking out if the requirements are correct at an early stage. So apart from A, C is also correct. So the correct answer here would be option A and option C. But then let's have a look at what makes option D and E wrong. So let's take option D. Static testing makes it possible to find runtime problems early in the life cycle. So if you give a look at this statement, you can see that you have a keyword called the runtime. And if you remember, I had told you earlier that dynamic testing is related to execution. That is, you are executing some code or executing something. So runtime means you are executing something, which means that this is related to dynamic testing. So static testing will never be able to find out runtime problems early. That is, runtime means you'll get the problems only if you're executing the code. So based upon this understanding, you should be able to mark out D as wrong. And moving forward, you have the very last option. That is, when testing safety critical system, static testing has less value because of dynamic testing as it finds the defects better. This is a wrong statement because if you just consider what is being tested here, that is, you are testing a safety critical system. So, a system like that would never want anything to be omitted, be it static testing, dynamic testing, everything you would be taken into consideration because this is related to safety. So, in that case, you can also rule out that E is the wrong option. So, based upon these understanding, you should be able to come at the conclusion that A and C is the right answer here. Okay, we'll just move forward with our next chapter, test techniques. This is the most difficult chapter as far as ISTQB exam is considered. It's just simply because you have a lot of application questions coming from this chapter. And application questions means you are not going to mug up or by heart remembering things. Nothing will work. You definitely have to understand and you will have to apply something to get to an answer. So when you learn this chapter, please make sure that you are not remembering anything. Rather, you should be able to understand the concept and then apply the concept. So let's have a look at what is included in this. First, we have the categories of test techniques. So these are basically would include the different test technique process that are being carried out during our testing. Then you have black box test techniques and white box. So black box, white box are two terms which are very, very familiar as far as a tester is concerned. So, as the name itself suggests, black box means you are just concentrating on the input and output, not worried about what exactly is present within the system, or rather, you're not worried about what the internal architecture, design, anything is. So, that's what black box testing is all about. Then you have the white box testing. White box, as the name itself suggests, you can see it's white, like everything is so transparent, which means it's related to the analysis of internal architecture. You are very well aware of what exactly is happening within the system, like you are aware about the code, the architecture, the internal design, everything is so transparent. So white box test technique is all about this. Then you have something called the experience based test techniques. So this experience based test techniques, I don't think you could have come across a term like this, but then if you hear the subheadings, you should be aware of this technique. There is, you have the exploratory testing coming under this experience based test technique. Then you have something called the checklist based testing. Then you have the error based testing. Of this, definitely you should be aware about the exploratory testing, and you should have done this at least once in your career. So this exploratory based testing is nothing. This is something that you do on a very random basis. That is, you don't have any test cases, you are very short of time. In that case, all you have is just the experience about using such a system, or the knowledge about, or prior knowledge on how the system works. So based upon your experience, you will take up those testing techniques. So this is just a brief introduction of what testing techniques are included in this chapter. So let's go to the question. Look at this question. This is an application level question taken from K3 level, and this will definitely make you understand to the extent of difficulty you can face while taking up this exam. So, and you are not going to get questions more difficult than this. This is the maximum difficulty level you will come across while taking this exam. So, let me just read the question for you. An employee's bonus is to be calculated. It cannot be negative, but it can be calculated down to zero. The bonus is based on the length of employment, that is less than or equal to 2 years, more than 2 years but less than 5 years, 5 to 10 years inclusively, or longer than 10 years. What is the minimum number of test cases required to cover all valid equivalence partitions for calculating the bonus? So, if you read this question, you should be able to understand which test technique is being applied here. So, the keyword that will help you to find out that is equivalence partitions. So, let me just give you a brief introduction about this equivalence partition, so you'll be better understanding this question. So, something called equivalence partition means you have a certain set of partitions or values, and based upon these partitions, you are supposed to pick up one value from each partition. So that's how the test case will be prepared. Say you have 10 partitions, which means you will have 10 test cases. You have 20 partitions, 20 test cases. So the count of the partition is going to be the count of your test case. So let's have a look at this question again. So the first statement says that it cannot be negative, but it can be calculated down to zero. So the first partition here would be your employment should be greater than zero, and then less than or equal to 2 years. So that's your first partition. Let's say that E is your employment length. So the partition would be 0 less than or equal to E less than or equal to 2. That's your first partition. Moving on, more than 2 years but less than 5 years, which means more than 2 means 2 less than E less than 5. So this is your second partition. The second statement is your second partition. The first statement is the first partition. Now, coming to the third statement, you have to be really careful here because it says 5 to 10 years inclusively or longer than 10 years. So here what happens is you the chances of selecting the option 3 is very high, because if you see you have 3 bullet points, 3 partitions, so you'll jump into the conclusion that 3 is the number of test cases that you require. But if you just carefully observe the questions, you will see a keyword or that is put between the two, that is 5 to 10 years inclusively or longer than 10 years, which means the third question has two partitions. So altogether, the first question, that is less than equal to 2 years, means one partition, more than 2 years means second partition, and the third point will give you two partitions. So instead of 3, the correct answer here is 4. So the minimum number of test cases required is 4. So this is exactly what happens while taking your exam. You might be in some tension, or you might be worried if you are able to crack this exam. But please remember, you need to be having a cool mindset. Only then you will pick up such keywords like or and be more careful in answering these questions. So this is the maximum level of difficulty you can get for your ISTQB exam, a question from K3 level. And definitely test technique is a very difficult chapter, and you'll definitely have such problematic questions wherein you have to apply the concept that you have learned over time in your testing career. So let's move forward. Next is the chapter 5 called the test organization. If you consider this chapter, I hope you remember the point that is, this is no longer given importance in the current syllabus. Earlier, a lot of questions used to come from this chapter. But just to make you familiar with what exactly is included here, let me just give you a brief introduction of these subtopics. So, first, we have something called the test organization. This is the information about the test manager, tester, or whoever is involved in your testing community. So everything falls under this test organization. Then you have something called the test planning and estimation. This would include your test plan, test strategy, entry exit criteria, everything related to planning out how exactly you're going to carry out your test. Then you have the test monitoring and control. It's all about test reports, as the name itself suggests, is monitoring and control, which means you need to have some document to monitor as well as control, and test reports fall under this. Then you have something called the configuration management. So this is all about version control, like test items are unique and you have some version control applied to make sure that these test items corresponds to a particular version. And then you have something called the risk and testing. Basically, risk would be the risk that is related to your software or the testing that you are doing. So you have some testing techniques or related to this risk. And then finally you have called defect management. So this will have something called your defect report, or maybe the techniques you are going to handle, how the defect is getting handled. Everything falls under defect management. So, since we had just a brief overview of this section, let's go to the question. So, here comes the question. So, this is obviously a K3 question, and being a K3 question, it's never going to be small, it will be very lengthy. But then, as I have already told you, please remember a lengthy question doesn't mean it's difficult. Maybe it's the easiest question that will be given to you in your test paper. So let me just read the question for you. You are testing a new version of software for a coffee machine. The machine can prepare different types of coffee based on four categories, that is, coffee, size, sugar, milk, and syrup. The criteria are as follows: coffee size is given, sugar is given, milk is given, and coffee flavor is given. So, this is basically a description of how you are going to prepare a coffee. But the question here is, now you are writing a defect report with the following information. So, what is being included in the defect report? So, if you have seen this overview before, you should have noticed that there's a topic called defect management, and this defect report comes under defect management. So, here we have a defect report with the following information, that is title, short summary, expected result, degree of risk, and priority. And the question for you is, what valuable information was omitted in the above defect report? So, if you have to answer this question, either you should be familiar with the defect report in your testing career, or like you should have prepared one while you were testing something, or if you have not prepared it, or if you're a fresher, then also if you have read the defect report syllabus once, you should be able to come with an answer. So, you have four questions here. There is the actual test result, data identifying the tested coffee machine, status of the defect, ideas for improving the test case. So this is very simple question actually. You should be able to answer this. So can you just give me a comment like which one would you think is the right answer? Because it's quite interesting question, and please give it a try. Let's see if you're able to do it. Yeah, I can see option A. Come on, try some questions and answers. Only then you are going to crack this exam. If you're going to sit back and listen, not applying the questions, syllabus, anything, then it's just you're watching a video or a movie. It's just similar to that. Yeah, I can see another answer, actual result. Then somebody called Annie has said it's A. Okay, so all of you say that it's the actual test result. So the key word here in this question is the very first line of this question. That is, if you are familiar with something called versions in your testing career, you should be knowing that you will have the first release where you will have the first version of the website or the application you are testing. Then in the next release, you will have the next version. So the question itself says you are testing a new version of software for a coffee machine, which means a new version is being tested here. But with this title, short summary, expected result, degree of risk, priority, etc., if the version is not given, what is the point in knowing what defect it is or what it is getting linked to? The very first thing that a defect report should contain is an identifier. That is, you need to identify the system for which the defect was raised. Okay, actual test result is something you would definitely think about because you have the expected result given here. Then definitely you would think maybe only if the actual result is given, you will be able to find out what exactly the defect is, because the difference between the two, that would be a scenario you would be thinking of. But then have you ever thought you don't know which system is performing this, or rather you don't know which system is coming up with this defect? Then how can you verify that with the system? Or how can you, just being a developer, how will you know that if you carry out this test case steps in this system, you are going to come up with this defect? So that is something that you have to be very careful about. That is, you need to learn what exactly has to be included in the defect report. And the most important point as far as a defect report is an identifier that will be unique, and that is nothing but the version of the system that you are going to test. So it's absolutely okay to think that it's option A, and this is a very, very basic first step. Maybe you're listening to these questions for the first time, but please don't lose your hope, because I would say if you do more and more of questions, this is very easy to crack. This exam is very, very easy. It's just a matter of time and effort you need to put on this. So just moving forward, so here's our final chapter, chapter 6, that is tool support for testing. So this is a very, very easy chapter. That is, you are not going to get indirect questions. As you see, the K levels assigned as K1 and K2, it's very simple. All you have to do is remember, understand the concept, then you'll come with an answer. So under this you have two categories, that is test tool considerations and effective use of tools. So first one is a test tool consideration. So test tool is nothing, that's, it's basically the tools you will be using for automation in your company. So if it's a Windows application, you can use an UFT tool, or you be aware of a Tosca tool or a Postman. So basically whatever you're using for automation falls under this. So test tool consideration deals with how you are going to decide which tool to use, or maybe on which basis the classifications will be done on tool selection. So everything related to that would be coming under test tool consideration. Then you have the effective use of tools. So here what we will be handling is, you have something called the principles based on which the tool is selected, using pilot projects to introduce tools. So you have both these topics falling under effective use of tools. So this is a very easy chapter. You don't have to put a lot of effort into it. Just read through it once, just get familiarized with the concept and the points that is mentioned. You'll definitely be able to answer this. So let's go to the question now. Okay, this is something you can answer even if you have not read this syllabus or question from your testing experience. Which one of the following is most likely to be a benefit of test execution tools? So you have four options here. It is easy to create regression test. It is easy to maintain version control of test asset. It is easy to design test for security testing. And the final option is, it is easy to run regression test. So if you have started automation or you have done automation at some point, you should be able to answer this. So let's see if you are able to answer this. Come on, as usual, you can put in the comment box. Yeah, Lakshmi, actually option A is not the answer. Yeah, it's very, very okay to think so, like option A is the answer. But if you consider, option A can be the answer only if the version is mentioned. Like actual result, you can consider it only if you are very particular or you know which version is giving the actual result. Suppose version 1 gives an actual result, version 2 gives another actual result. You just can't go and check out. Suppose you have 10 versions, you can't be sitting and executing the test steps in the 10 versions and then coming to a conclusion. So the first point is to make sure which is the version of the application which came out with the defect. So that is the reason why we didn't choose option A as the answer. Okay, we have a lot of options, and yeah, I think you are all automation testers because you are getting it quite right. Or maybe you should be familiar with this automation testing. Okay, so the correct answer, as all of you have given, is option D. And for all those who have not answered it, let me just explain the other options for you. So the first option here is it is easy to create regression test. Okay. Using, if you see the word test execution tools, it is not easy to create regression test. You have to write the code for the test. That is, creation is not very easy. You have to put in an effort to create the scripts. The tool is not going to go and create the scripts. So it's definitely not option A. And if you see option B, it is easy to maintain version control of test assets. What is doing the version control is actually the configuration management tools. It's not the test execution tool that goes in for the version control. Then you have option C. It is easy to design test for security testing. So security testing, if you say, like, it's a specialized tool that is being used for security testing. You cannot generalize it as a test execution tool. So that's why option C is also not coming into picture. And then, as all of you, like, I think most of this answer is D. Yeah, it's definitely true. And it's correct that it's easy to run the regression test. And that is absolutely right for this question. And so this was the last question of our chapter. And now let's have a quiz time, or you can just give me some answers so that we'll have an idea of how exactly you are okay with the syllabus or what you are familiar with. So let's start with the first question. The first question for you is, which of the following is an example of a task that can be carried out as a part of the test process? Option A is analyzing a defect. Option B is designing test data. Option C is assigning a version to a test item. And the final option is writing a user story. So I'll just give you 45 seconds. I know it's comparatively less, but then you have to be aware that you have to complete 40 questions in 60 minutes, which means the time you can spend on a question is just 1.5. So 1.5 minutes means it's less. And then if it's an application question, definitely you would require more time on the application question. But as you see, this is a K1 question that is very easy. Just it's taken directly from the syllabus. So come on, start giving me the answers for this question. Okay, give it a try. Just tell me which option would be the right answer. You can just comment in the chat box. B. So we have a lot of good testers here, and we have a lot of answers coming, and that too right answers. Okay. So I have two answers here. Yeah, the option B is the right answer. It's absolutely right. So for those who have not answered, let me just give you an idea of why option B turned out to be the right answer. So the first option is analyzing a defect. So analyzing a defect falls under debugging and not test process. So if you see the keyword test process, you should be able to rule out that A is not an option because it says analyzing a defect. Then the second option is designing test data. Creation of test data always comes under test process. That's something very, very a general or a crucial part of this testing process. Then you have option C, that's assigning a version to a test item. So version, whenever you see the term version, it definitely is linked to configuration management and not test process. So with that point in mind, you will be able to rule out option C. And the final option is writing a user story. So if you're basically working in an agile team, you should be aware that who's writing the user story. So definitely writing a user story is a member of the agile team, maybe your PO or a scrum master. So it's definitely not coming into the test process. So the right option would be option B, that is designing the test data. Okay, so now let's go to the next question. So this is based upon the exploratory testing, and if you were very keen on what you I told about exploratory testing before, you should be able to answer this question. So I'll just read out the options for you. A testing practice in which an in-depth investigation of the background of the test object is used to identify the potential weakness that are examined by test cases. An approach to testing whereby the testers dynamically design and execute tests based on their knowledge, exploration of the test item and the results of previous test. An approach to test design in which test activities are planned as uninterrupted sessions of test analysis and design, often used in conjunction with the checklist based testing. Then you have the final option, that is testing based on the tester's experience, knowledge, and intuition. So, which one is the best description for the exploratory testing? So, the correct option, yeah, I have some options given here. Yes, option B is given. I don't know if it's the previous option or the current option that you're mentioning. Anyway, option B is the right answer. So, how did you come to option B? It's basically if you have long sentences like this, it's good to search in for some keywords. So, keywords are something that will help you conclude with an answer. So, if you see option B, an approach to testing where the testers dynamically design and execute tests based on their knowledge, exploration of the test item, and results of previous test. So, if you have observed, I had told earlier that this exploratory testing is generally done where you don't have time to write test cases, or you are very busy and you have to give the test results very quickly. In that case, you go in for the exploratory testing, and all you have there is the knowledge, exploration, and the results of the previous test. So if you know that point, you should be able to rule out all other options and then come down to option B. So it's that keyword that helped you decide it's option B. So somebody has said it's option D, then someone has said C. So let me just explain that for you too. See, option D is the definition of experience based testing. That is, it is based on a tester's experience, knowledge, and intuition. And if you have observed, this experience based testing is a general topic. You have a lot of testing coming under it. That is, you have error based, checklist based testing, exploratory testing. So it's not unique, or maybe it's not to the point. It's a general definition. If the question is like which of the following provides the best description for experience based testing, then definitely option D would be the right answer. So that's why option D didn't turn out to be the right answer. Then somebody had said that it's option C. C, okay. Option C is actually the definition for session based testing, wherein the keyword execution is replaced by analysis. So, an approach to test design in which test activities are planned as uninterrupted sessions of test analysis and design. So, the keyword here is actually uninterrupted sessions. So the session keyword should be used to find out that this is definition of session based testing. Then they have also intentionally created an error here. Actually, the word should be execution, but then they have replaced execution with analysis in the statement. So that's why option C is not the answer. Then you have something called option a testing practice in which in depth investigation of the background of the test object is used to identify the weaknesses that are examined by the test cases. So, how you figure out this is not the answer is the keyword in depth investigation. You have very little time. Then, how is an in depth investigation possible? Definitely, it's not possible. So, that's how you conclude that option A is also not the correct answer. So, that leaves you with option B, which is the correct answer. So, if the question is something very descriptive, just read the question and search for the keywords. That is how you are going to conclude at an answer. So, now let's go to the next question. Yeah, this is a question from the test technique topic, and you have a problematic question. Usually, test techniques will come with problematic questions because it includes K3 level questions. So, let me just read the question for you. A speed control and reporting system has the following characteristics. If you drive 50 kilometer or less, nothing will happen. If you drive faster than 50 but not more than 55, you will be warned. If you drive faster than 55 but not more than 60, you will be fined. If you drive faster than 60, your driving license will be suspended. The speed in kilometer is available to the system as an integer value. So the question is, which would be the mostly like set of values identified by applying the boundary value analysis, where only the boundary values on the boundaries of equivalence classes are relevant? So if you want to figure out under which topic this question comes, then you just look in for the keyword. So as you have seen earlier, you just found the keyword equivalence partition in the question you had seen before. So if you look in for such keywords, here you would find a keyword called the boundary value analysis. So that will help you find out which test technique are they talking about. So this question is basically a question on boundary value analysis. So if you see, you have four options given here, and then we'll just convert this into boundary values. As the name suggests, it's nothing, just you're picking up the boundary values. So first question, if you drive 50 kilometer or less, nothing will happen. So the boundary value here is 50. So let's go to the next statement. If you drive faster than 50 but not than 55, you will be warned. Faster than 50 means it's 51, and not more than 55 means it's 55. So you have two values here. Then you have,
Elizabeth,
yes,
one second. Can you zoom a little the screen? I think in chat box we can see, not able to see.
yeah, can you see now? It's actually an image, so I think that's why it's not working.
Okay, then no problem. Carry on. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So you have the second question. I'll just share the PPT with you later. You can definitely try out this and then reach back to us with the comments and we'll reply to it. So the second statement is if you drive faster than 50 but not more than 55, which means you have two values here, that is 51 and 55. Then next you have faster than 55, not more than 60, 56 and 60. Then the final value would be 61, which means altogether you have 50, 51, 55, 56, 60 and 61, which is option D. So this is nothing but the basic mathematics that is getting applied here. You should be familiar with boundary values in your max classes. So that's exactly what is applied here. You just write down the sentences into expressions using greater than or equal to sign, and then you pick up the boundary values and then get to a conclusion. So if you write this into mathematical expressions, it would be easier. And based on that, you'll pick up option D. So that's how you will solve this question. So moving forward, we have question 4. So this is basically a question on black box, white box, and experience-based test techniques. So it's a match the following type of question. So like you can do this question provided you are very familiar with the black box, white box, and experience-based techniques. It's a K2 level question where a little bit of understanding is required. So let's see what the question is. Which of the following best matches the description with the different categories of test techniques? You have 5 options here. First one, coverage is measured based on the selected structure of the test object. 2, the processing within the test object is checked. 3, tests are based on defects likelihood and their distribution. 4, deviations from the requirements are checked. 5, user stories are used as the test basis. So what you have to do is you have black, white, and experience. You just have to match these points to those and then figure out which is the right option. So if you know what white box, what black box, and what experience is, this is a very easy question. So can you just check out like what the answer would be? Just try writing this down because it's very easy. Just as usual, go in for the keywords, check for the keywords, and then convert that to the option. That's the simple way. Then I'll definitely explain why this is white box, why this is experience, why this is black. So you will get an idea about it. So the first option is coverage is measured based on a selected structure of the test object. So if you just look at the statement here, go in for the keyword, or you are just checking out what keyword is mentioned here. Just make a note of the keyword structure. So anything that is related to the internal structure is related to white box testing. So definitely one would come under white box testing, because had it been black box testing, it just takes into consideration the input and the output. It's not bothered about what is exactly within the test object or what is the code, etc. So option 1 is an example of white box testing. Going next, the processing within the test object is checked. So the keyword here is within the test object. Again, they are referring to something that is present within the test object, or you can say within the application. And you are definitely looking into the application. You are not bothered about the input or the output, but you are rather bothered about what is exactly within the application. So based on that keyword within, you should be able to understand that 2 falls under white box testing. Next, we have tests are based on defects likelihood and their distribution. So defect likelihood and their distribution. This is generally like how frequently defects occur and how they are getting distributed. And you should be able to understand this only if you have experience. That is, you should be seeing the system for some time and you know exactly where the defects would occur. So based upon that keyword, that is defect likelihood and their distribution, this falls under experience based test technique. So 3 comes under experience. Then you have deviations from the requirements are checked. So this 4 comes under black box technique. That is, requirements are checked means you are just checking out a requirement would generally fall under the input or output. So that's all about the input and output, nothing related to the code or something. Like they just give you the input and what output they are expecting out of it. It's up to you to decide what exactly you are going to do or what is the code or the architecture you are going to build. So this is coming under black box technique. And the fifth one is user stories are used as the test basis. This is also black box technique because this is just a story. They are not going to tell that you do this architecture, you go in for this design. It's definitely the developer's idea to decide what exactly will be put forward to meet this user story. So based on these points, 4 and 5 comes under black box technique. So if you consolidate all this, then you should be able to understand that option A is the right answer. There is black box means 4 and 5, white box is 1 and 2, and experience is 3. Okay, so going forward, yeah, we have a column here. I hope you can see that. So this is the next question. This is question 5 that is based upon the priorities and dependencies. So this is a question that we had already solved earlier. So you should be able to do this also. That is, first one is test case number 1, test case 2. That is, you have around 6 test cases given, and then you have the technical dependency as well as the logical dependency. Then you have a priority. So based upon the intuition that something gets executed on a priority basis only if you are going to look up to the dependency it's related to. So if you see here, high priority is given for test case 1 and 3. So you will definitely start with test case 1, test case 3. But if you just check out the logical dependency, technical dependency column, you'll come to know that test case 4 is having a dependency. So which means 1 and 2 gets executed only if 4 is getting executed. So the order would be 4, 1, 2 or 4, 2, 1. Then we'll go to the next point. That is, you are done with 1 and 3. So then you go to next, that is after high you have medium. So 1, 3 and 4 is done. Again you have 6 in picture. But if you see 6, you can see that corresponding to the technical dependency, you have test case number 5. And so 6 will get executed only if 5 is getting executed. So which means you have to execute 5 before 6. So now the order would be 4, 1, 3, 5, and 6. But if you go to 5, corresponding to 5, you can see that test case 2 is written as a dependency, which means before 5 is executed, you need to execute 2. So it's actually a trial method wherein you are just drawing some pictures and just fixing in between the pictures and coming to a conclusion. So based upon this table, you just draw out which test case needs to be executed before, after, and then come at a conclusion. So if you're just trying out this, you should be able to get option B as the right answer. This is a very easy question, and the only concept you need to be aware of is the dependency needs to be handled before the priority is handled. It is priority is important, but if you are going to execute a high priority test case, and if that is having a dependency on something else, you need to make sure that the dependency is getting executed first. Only then the priority test case will get executed. It's that one point that will actually help you to solve this question. Like if you look at this question on a random basis, if you just see the tables, the values, etc., you can think that it's a very difficult question. But no, this is a very, very easy question, provided you know this concept. Okay, so we'll just move on to the next question. So this is our final question for the day. That is question 6. This is from tools part. That is, you have a match the following type of question. That is, given the following test activities and test tools, you need to match this 1 to 4 with A to D. So this is basically a question based upon the definition. This is a more of a direct question. That is, performance measurement and dynamic analysis can be matched to dynamic analysis tool. Then you have test execution and logging. This will be matched to requirement coverage tools. Then you have management of testing and testware, that is mapped to defect management tools. And finally, test design is mapped to test data preparation tools. Even if you don't know what exactly the tool is, if you have an idea of what this 1 to 4 is all about, you will definitely be able to map them. Like you have an idea that test data is linked to test design, then definitely you would be selecting test data preparation tools for the option test design. So it's more of a logical question where you just need to apply what you learned in the chapter. So if you map all this, you will come with option C as the right answer. So these are the 6 questions which we had seen. Apart from these 6 questions, we had earlier seen another 6 question, and altogether we saw 12 questions from different chapters with different difficulty levels. And I hope you now have a clear picture of what the difficulty level would be when you take up the exam, and what will be easy, what will be not easy. So that's something you should be aware by now. So before concluding, let's have a look at how we can climb up the ISTQB certification ladder as we move forward in our career. That's equally important. You're not going to sit as a what would you say? You're not going to sit as a fresher for a long time. You definitely plan to move up, right? So what exactly is that? So the next slide will tell that. So this is a chart which says what next or the way forward. You have around 3 levels here. There is foundation, advanced, and expert level, which falls under 3 different pillars, that is agile, core, and specialist. Based upon your career, you decide your way forward. Like you want to take the agile path, you want to take the core path, or you want to do it for some specialization certification. But remember, the basic requirement to take any of these 3 route is the CTFL exam. That is our basic foundation level exam we had just seen. So if you want to climb up the ladder, the very first step is go in and clear the foundation level exam. So first, crack this exam and climb up the ladder for a wonderful career. So, the takeaway or tip to clear this exam is focus on smart work more than hard work. So, what you need is smart work more than hard work, because the syllabus is really vast. You have around 6 chapters, different difficulty levels, different questions. It's hard to remember things. It's quite difficult from a aspirant learning a lot of things. But if you just focus on smart work more, definitely you'll able to crack this exam. So, with this, we have come to an end of the session, and I hope this was a wonderful session and you had a lovely time with us.
And thank you, Elizabeth. It was a wonderful session. I hope this session would really helpful for your ISTQB exam preparations. Please make sure to use the tips and tricks that we discussed today. And we wish you all the very best for your ISTQB exams. And finally, a big thank you from Team Obscura Zone. Stay safe. Good night. Thank you.